So are we all ready? Yeah? All systems go? Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody to the first Diversity and Inclusion Initiative at the Ojai Film Festival. It's really wonderful to be able to host and moderate this panel with such very accomplished people on it, filmmakers and talent. And what we're going to be discussing today is the growth of career opportunities and pathways for women in filmmaking, which have really been in an unprecedented amount of growth, I can say, within all of our career lifetimes. So it's a very important time to be able to discuss that. And I'd like to give everybody a little introduction, and then if I leave something out that's important, please fill in and let everybody know. Well, first of all, I've known Tamika for over a decade, and I met her through her initiative to it was called Make a Film Foundation, to make films with terminally ill children, and she's done so much. Above and beyond. So she's currently the Senior Vice President of Development and Production at a new film company called Filmco. And there's more about her in her biography: screenwriting, talent backgrounds, production backgrounds, directing, just your CDDP initiative, so many different works that she does to help raise profile and visibility within the filmmaking community. And Kamala, who I've just been introduced to, also has a really stupendous background as talent, has been acting for decades, has such an amazing range of credits, and is an activist and an advocate in every sense of the word, and has some wonderful initiatives right now herself to discuss. And Anna, who is currently a professor of screenwriting at Art Center, also has an amazing pathway. Really, when I spoke to Anna, I was really struck by what she said, which is she started writing in a language other than English, knowing she was screenwriting and preparing content, and switched to writing in English at some point, and felt like just celebrating every single milestone of being able to communicate her ideas and get them out to a wider world. So we have really such an amazing panel of diverse talent, and not just that we're connected by our gender, but we're all connected by having worn multiple roles, multiple hats, and been in multiple roles. So, with that, I'd just like to start by asking each of our panelists about their initial passion for filmmaking, and what really got you started into your career pathway.
You're starting with me? Okay. So I actually started as an actor. When I was really young, I went to an audition for The Wiz, and I'm a terrible singer, by the way. but I got bit by the acting bug, and so I started going down that pathway. And then I went to college for performing arts and started to write and direct, and so that sort of led me down the pathway of being behind the scenes. So really my career these days is mostly behind the scenes. I still do some acting. I produced a feature that I starred in, and I hadn't been acting for a long time. And and also Make a Film Foundation, which Rose did the sound for, really led me down my path of producing. So I sort of cut my teeth on producing, making these short films. We've made like over 100 documentaries and 4 short narratives for these kids. But that's how I got sort of thrown into the path of producing at a high level, because we were producing with like A-list talent, and we're working with kids and stuff like that. So, there's a lot to deal with when you're working. Even when people are volunteering and doing something altruistic, if they are A-list talent, directors or actors, you still have a lot of stuff that you have to deal with them. So yeah.
Well, I started as a child actor. I started my career in Venezuela, where I was growing up. I was born in Brooklyn, but my family moved to Venezuela when I was very little. And I started doing theater in Venezuela when I was 7. And when I was 13, I really knew that I wanted to be in New York City so that I could get to a good acting school. I knew I wanted to train. So I I convinced my parents to move back to New York, and I started, when I was 14, I started at Herbert Berghoff Studios in Manhattan, and went out and got myself an agent all by myself, and was on Sesame, my first job was on Sesame Street. And so I played Mercedes, Maria's cousin. And I taught kids Spanish. So she would say, "Oh, look at the mesa." I mean, she'd say, "Look at the table," and I'd say, "Mesa." And then from there, I went to Yale for theater. Took those years off to continue to pursue my studies. And then after Yale, I did some film and TV in New York, and then moved out west and have been here ever since. About the mid-90s, I started to get really upset because all my roles were so duplicative and so reductive and so unlike me. And so I formed my own production company in 1994 called Heroica Films, with the aim to produce media by, for, and about women, both in front and behind the camera. And that was not a highly appealing idea in Hollywood in 1994. Not that it necessarily is now, I don't know, we can have that discussion. But at that time, it was quite ridiculous. And from there, it took me a long time to produce my first feature film, which was called A Single Woman, about our first U.S. Congresswoman, Jeanette Rankin, who was elected to Congress in 1916 before women had the right to vote. She was the only person to vote against U.S. entry into both world wars, and ultimately she did get us the vote. And so that was my first film, and then my second film, which I produced with my husband, Joel Marshall, is called Equal Means Equal, and it's about the fact that at the point when I made the film, women still did not have equal rights under the United States Constitution, although 96% of Americans thought they did. So that for me became a real problem and it's still the case that most Americans don't know that women are not included in the Constitution, they're deliberately excluded, and what that means. So we made that film, and it took about 15 years. But it went on to win a lot of awards, and it went on actually to get the last 3 states ratified. Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia in 2020. And so the ERA became law on January 27th of 2020. But then Donald Trump ordered his Attorney General, William Barr at the time, to stop the archivist from publishing the ERA in the Constitution. And so I formed a nonprofit at that point, and we were suing the Trump administration, and now we're suing the Biden administration that has changed not one iota of Trump policy on women, by the way. And that
Thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah. So then what I can do now.
I love.
So for me, I guess I wasn't an actor. I didn't start acting at all because I don't think that I can do it. But I did love singing and dancing when I was little. I was born and grew up in China, and we actually didn't have a personal choice of what we'd like to do. Everything is decided by the government for us. So I just, after I finished my high school, we need a job, and somehow the government decided I would be a very good film editor. So I was getting a job as a film editor. So that's how I started my film career. I had no clue what was film editing. My family had no connection in entertainment industry. My dad was a professor, my mom was a doctor, and I was the only child. So first thing I did when I went to the studio to, report for duty, I cried. I don't know why I'm here, or I don't know what I'm doing, and can I leave? And the party leader at the studio said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I don't want to be here." So I did. Actually, I left at my home. My mom was so angry at me. Said, "How could you disobey the party's will?" So she took me back to the studio. Fortunately, gave me to the party leader at the studio. Said, "She's yours. Do whatever you could to make her love what she has to do." And so I stayed. And but I was still kind of struggling because I really didn't know what filmmaking is, let alone editing. And then the funny story is, this was late 80s. Kodak, Hollywood, right, wants to enter Chinese market. So somehow Kodak decided to take their film to China to introduce Kodak film stock to Chinese filmmakers. In order to do so, they set up different workshops. One of the workshop was editing. So different studios sent editors to the workshop, and I was one of the 25. And the first day at the workshop, we were giving a little reel, 16 millimeter, without any sound and no dialogue. It's just image. And they said, Kodak set up very nicely. We each have our own little bench. They said, according to the image, we cut it. You guys are editors, and see how you can tell your own story through visual. And we did. And then afterward, 25 different versions of, you won't even believe it, the Hitchcock's North by Northwest, Cary Grant being chased by the duster. And we, of course, we didn't know who, I didn't know who Hitchcock is, so if I knew, I wouldn't have dared. But we didn't know, so ignorance is blessing. And we cut it. And that's actually the first time that I realized the power of image storytelling. And I just fell in love with it. Then the next hurdle became, I want to direct. If I can tell a story, try to be a director rather than an editor. And the studio said, no, you're a woman. Wait until there's a crew of everybody is female, you can direct. And I said, no, I can't wait. So I left. I decided to come to this country because there's a place called Hollywood. And there's a place called American Dream Land of Dream Come True. So I decided to go here. And so I left my career as an editor, and I left my home, and I left everybody I knew behind, and came to this country not speaking a single word in English, with $20 in my pocket. And so first hurdle has to learn English. So I went to Pasadena City College and learned my English and applied to UCLA Film School in directing. And the rest of it is history. I made 7 movies as director, and I wrote many as a writer, and also I produced many because I do cross-bridge American production and Chinese production. And the latest one is actually, if you want to see it, it's an IMAX documentary called, what is it called, Asteroid Hunters. And it's in theater, in IMAX theater, in all the science museums. So I actually put this deal together between Chinese investors and IMAX. So I produced it. So I do that too. But it is a struggle. I realized Hollywood is no different than China. what my studio party member told me, wait for all-female crew to direct their first movie. Hollywood is the same, so I had to do it on my own, and so that's kind of how I started my career.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. I think one of the commonalities is that idea that you can't wait for somebody else to represent your culture, your voice, your unique point of view. But there had to be people that saw your spark and your passion and decided to extend mentorship or opportunity. And if there's any notable moment where you had an opportunity or mentorship, or you felt like somebody really sees me and gets me, and you received some level of help or assistance, if there's any outstanding anecdotal story from your own experience you want to tell about how that helped grow your career.
Well, I do. Sorry. Yeah. But like I said, right, when I came here, I didn't speak English, and so I went to Pasadena State College. While I was learning English, I applied to UCLA's film school. Somehow the admission is, there's twofold. Once the film school gives you admission, telling you we love you, we want to take you, and one is university admission according to your criteria of GPA and all that kind of stuff. So in my case, because I actually was a editor, and so my resume looks really good. So the UCLA Film School looked at my resume, and I got a letter. I remember clearly it was I was in the bathroom, and I got a letter, and I was like, oh, hopefully it's not a rejection. So I just opened the tiny little bit of look, and the first word is congratulations. I was like, okay, good. And I opened the letter, and it's congratulations. It must be good news. And so the film school accepted me. 2 days later, I got another letter, and I didn't wait. I just like, oh, good. It's from admission, and then the first word is regretfully. Like what? So the film school accepted me, but the university didn't, because my English wasn't good enough, and I didn't know what to do. Because I was, in Pasadena, I actually volunteered myself to help actually contact President's wife, Mrs. Everhart, which I met, didn't know who she is. I just thought, oh, this older black lady seems very nice. I'm going to practice my English with her. And it turned out that she's so I was practicing my English, and it turned out she's the President's wife. So, and she was new too, just like me. She came, her husband just took the job at Caltech, and so she's new to, California, LA, Pasadena, and I was from China. So, however we talked, somehow we understood each other. I don't know how, but she said, well, do you want to help me? We need to send out Christmas cards, right, as a present to whoever. And so I said, sure, I will lick the envelope for you. So I did that. And so that's how I met her. And so she was the only one, when I got these 2 letters, so she was the only one I knew I could ask for, because I didn't know anything about this whole system. So I sent this, I went to her and showed this 2 letters. And she actually personally took me to UCLA's admissions office and said, this woman, just look at what she's doing. She left China. She had no fear, even though she didn't know anybody. She didn't know even English. She came here. You can see the passion that she has for what she wants to do. You just wait until she can speak English. She'll be a great filmmaker. It'll be your loss if you don't pay her. And then, of course, I didn't know she actually is a incredible person coming from, that President's wife. Showed up at UCLA administration's office, and whether that worked or not, I got admission. And that's how I actually was able to go to UCLA. And she was the one, she said, you can't keep on licking envelopes for me. You need to pursue your dream. So she was the one. I really, because of that, I have been mentoring as whoever, doesn't have to be a Chinese American student, anybody. I've been mentoring people because I felt like if I could even just pass the torch a little bit, and I may not be as powerful as she was, but at least in my own power, I can help next generation. It would be great. So that was my little story of the mentorship.
Thank you. Sure. So mine is about a director he was a friend of mine, and he was a director and a producer, and he ended up on a reality show, producing this first reality show years ago. In fact, they weren't as popular as they are now, but they were getting there. And he had seen my first short film, and I still hadn't really gained confidence as a director because I had only done one short narrative film. And he called me and he said, we're looking for directors for this new reality show. And it was a reality show. I was like, reality show? I'm a filmmaker. And he was like, no. We're looking for directors, and you're going to be the DP as well, because with reality shows at that time, you're going to be following everybody around with the camera. And I said, but I am not a camera person. I don't know how to do that. I'm, the tech stuff, right? I consider myself technically unsavvy. And he was like, we need directors. It's all about the eye. He's like, none of the other directors coming have used this camera before. None of them have. You'll be fine. And so I really almost talked myself out of the job. So really, he had more confidence in me than I had in myself. And he said, I promise you, I love your eye. That's what we're looking for. You can learn the rest. So I asked a friend of mine to help me. It was, back in the day, the Panasonic, HVX, whatever, what everybody was using. And he gave me a quick tutorial. I showed up. None of the other guys had ever even touched. I was like far ahead of everyone with my little tutorial that I had. But what was amazing about it is that changed my life in a lot of ways, because then I actually started getting corporate jobs as a director where I would have the camera and was doing all that stuff. It also was very helpful for my nonprofit because we were, everybody was using their own cameras and stuff, so it helped me in that way in various aspects of my career. So it just taught me to have confidence, to believe in myself, and to never talk myself out of the job. Just trust that you can learn what you need to know, and that you can do it. And so I really, respect and appreciated him for that.
I had a wonderful gentleman by the name of James Honore, who was the head of Sony Columbia TriStar's post-production department. And he was also the only person of color working at Sony. And he really made it his business to help young filmmakers of color that had absolutely no way to break through. So I remember going to him. I had my first short film. This was back in 1993. It was on 35. I had no idea of all of the multiple extensive steps that were ahead of me. And he literally put me on the end of Bad Boys. So every part of post, I was like Bad Boys quality sound mix, Bad Boys Foley session, Bad Boys, everything. And then he consistently, throughout my career, supported me and helped me in every way he could. And he just retired a couple of years ago. But I just say that because a lot of us are mentored by men. And really great men out there that want to see us move forward. So,
yeah, 100%. Well, thank you all for sharing these stories. I want to kind of take that same energy and ask you each, how do you feel opportunities for female filmmakers have changed, again, within the span of your career and experience? And I think we're in a groundbreaking time. So if other than these unique mentorships and opportunities that you've had, if there are other things that have really helped change or elevate your career, specifically that there being a focus on including more women, diversity initiatives, and a change of consciousness, if you have something specific you'd like to talk about.
I mean, I'll talk about my program first in a broader sense. I run a diversity and inclusion program called the Commercial Directors Diversity Program, and it's for underrepresented women and underrepresented people who want to direct commercials specifically. Yes. Yes. CDDprogram.org, and it's a great program, and it's like a 6-month program. We give a $15,000 grant. We team the fellows with production companies and help them to create a spec commercial, and we have like 2 months of intense immersive workshops, and then we do a big showcase screening of the work. Actually, we're doing it on Tuesday at San Marcos Drive-In, so if you want to come, you can come see it. It's, anybody who's in LA. So that's one thing, just working in that space. The programs are really important. I helped create it's called the Academy Gold program at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I used to work there researching and developing an inclusion program there as well. So in the exec space, I do believe in the programs. Back in the day, they had them, but they were not held accountable for actually helping move careers forward. So I think that's one way that it's changed. Like all of these programs out here that help women and other underrepresented directors, they can't just check off a box and say, oh, we have a program. They actually have to do something because they're being held accountable for the results. And
Are they though?
yes, I feel like they are. And even, for instance, I'll give you an example. One of the, maybe it's the Sony, I can't remember, but one of the directing programs now, and maybe there's a couple of them now, actually give you you get to direct a show. It's not like you shadow, right? They actually, you sign the thing and you're going to direct a show. So they support you in it.
But how do you get into there? Because I have been, honestly...
These programs?
Yeah, these programs are so... First of all, I'm friends with the head of the DGA, Tommy Schlamme now. I was friends with the head of the DGA before I would go and say, I want a shadow. I couldn't get in.
You were friends with Frank?
No.
No.
No. With
Frank
Michael Lapton
Oh, okay.
and Tommy Schlamme.
Okay.
And he had that show Shadow Falls or something. And I was trying to see, I just asked Tommy, I said, can I shadow somebody on your show? I got a meeting there. But then all of those shadow gigs were booked for 2 years before with like the assistants of the producers or the directors or the writers, or they had one slot of the 12 episodes that everybody was fighting for. And who the heck was I that I was going to get in there and do it? And so to that I say, I remember at the Toronto Film Festival speaking with a woman that ran the Swedish sort of equivalent of our film industry. And the way that they went from having 0 female-directed films at TIFF, from the next year having 8 of the 11 films directed by females, is she had benchmarks, dates, things. If people didn't do it, they'd be penalized. But again, the Swedish government is involved with funding these films. We don't have that. We have the open market, right? So the people's perception is that films made by us, or people that look like us, don't make the same amount of money as films made by white male directors, which is absolutely, completely false data. But that's what's occurring. So, I
feel like even that is changing. Because the proof is in the pudding. A lot of the films that are coming out that are directed by people of color are making a ton of money. So I don't think that that's, I mean, that might be the way that it was, and it might be still a little bit that way, but I think it's transforming.
It's definitely.
And yeah, and I totally feel you. I mean, the programs are so hard to get into. I applied to the AFI Directing Workshop for Women 3 times and got to the interview process every time. And then finally, it got to the point where it was the same 2 people, where they were like, so how you doing? Like literally, and then, so even for the program that I run, I send out an email, like every year I say, please just keep applying. I know it's a pain, but just keep applying because you never know. And some of the people who've gotten in are people who applied twice or 3 times. The Disney Fellowship, same thing. My brother and I used to make a joke about it. We were like, oh wait, because it was free to apply, right? We were like, oh, okay, well, we're doing our, normal, this is year 7 where we're applying for this program. And then I finally got in. Now, obviously, I feel like I have a lot of grace and I'm very grateful. It doesn't always happen that way. It's so competitive, right? But I think they're not all created equal. I agree, right? Programs are not all created equal, but I think it's worth applying to that.
Absolutely, and just to add to specifically what you're saying, of the top 100 grossing films in Hollywood, 4% were directed by women 3 years ago, 12% were directed by women 2 years ago, and last year 16%. So within 3 years, that's a jump of 12%, which is almost a doubling year after year of top 100 highest grossing films. And it's amazing to think that it was 89 years into the Academy's history before a woman won Best Director, which was Catherine Bigelow 11 years ago, and Chloe Zhao just won second female director ever last year with Nomadland. So we are in a really amazing time with a lot of change. But I don't know if you'd like to contribute more to specifically what we're talking about. Otherwise. I could move forward. But has this groundbreaking time allowed you more access to make film and content?
Well, I will say something because when I came to this country, right, in the early 90s, there is, you're right, there's no such conversation about, diversity of women, so there's 2 things. One is a gender issue and also the diversity issue. So, we always kind of a joke, how at that time, if they want to have diversity, they hired a black male, and if they want the gender equality, they hire a black woman. So that's the running joke, right? But right now, at that time, for me, there's no such thing that we were talking about the Disney program and the NBC and the HBO Class and the Sony. There's no such thing like that. Right now, almost every network, and including Warner Brother and Viewfinder, that's Viacom. So they all, right now, at least they realize this issue needs to be addressed. And so they all have this program, it's diversity program, and NBC actually specifically, beside their regular diversity program they can apply, they also has a specific one, Women Forward. So it's specifically for women, but they don't talk about women of color, right? So it's in many ways, white woman does have a leg up than woman of color in many ways. So that's another layer of the diversity, right? But still, it wasn't available even 10 years ago, right? So, like you were saying, if this number, top 100, it's growth, it's going up, that's a good sign, right? And I myself actually, it's a benefit of that change because, DGA has this wonderful program called Diversity Television Membership, and that didn't exist even 3 years ago. It only started about 2 years ago, and so I applied, and actually I am the proud member of 2021. The program will give you the opportunity. And also, if mention just a little extra news on what you were saying, the DGA actually negotiate with those network and platforms really hard, very thought for us that those programs, once you are in there, you're not just shadowing, they actually all agreed, every one of them agreed to let you to direct one. So that's a huge step, right? Whereas those programs, even just before this DGA negotiation, it was just only shadowing, not just competitive to getting, but even the getting is not guaranteed you can direct it because they're just shadowing, right? So right now DGA made another step forward by negotiating and you select the director, not just let her shadowing, you have to let her direct the program that she's shadowing on. So I think are there a lot of work need to be done? Yes, absolutely. It's still that, it was top 100, you present 16% women, but your population, woman is more than 50%. How come the top 100 is not 50% yet? So we still have a ways to go, but at the same time, we need to recognize the changes, because only do we recognize those changes will we be able to move forward. Because if we keep on blaming the past, then we can't see what's in front of us.
Yeah.
I think the goal is we will be part of this change. Let's make it happen. Hopefully next year we will be 20% back then, or one of them will be 9%. Right? That's how we move forward. Yeah.
Can I say one thing too? I just wanted to say, the thing that I've noticed most that I feel, sure we want core solid results. I want that job, I want the whatever, but the conversations have changed everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a mirror that's being reflected. So in any room that I go into, any set that I'm on, if there's a set and it's nothing but white people on it, they themselves go, I think we need to maybe we need to hire some other diverse people so that, or at a studio or whatever, even the company that I work at, they always have the conversations. Are we at least interviewing people for this position, right? Let's just try and interview some people for this position. So it's just a different thought process about what a room looks like, what the world looks like, and wanting to have that world reflected in the job force of Hollywood in every aspect of it.
There's so much to say on this particular subject matter, but I want
you to talk a little bit about your experience.
I know, right?
You have been on sets for decades as an important member of the crew, and I think a lot of times we're always talking about directors.
That's true.
But for women on the crew, it's incredibly difficult. I think you should speak with
Well, I can give one anecdotal story, but one thing I wanted to say is that we've all benefited from having people see past our gender and say to us, you have passion for this. I can see you really love the craft. I see you really love what you're doing so much that you're going to cry but get back up again and go try again. And one of the benefits I had was my grandparents who lived here in Ojai were filmmakers. My grandfather had a film and TV production company. And when I was a teenager wanting to get into filmmaking, my grandfather said, it's really hard out there. There's very few women who do this. So if you want to be taken seriously, you need to learn all the technical aspects and speak a technical language and be in the trenches. My grandfather had a military background, so he spoke a lot with military anecdotes, but it's not different mentally to be on a film crew than in a military, very regimented structure. It's departmentalized, and if you want to be respected, you must understand all the interlocking parts of filmmaking. So when my grandfather said to me, if you understand a technical language, that will bypass your gender. The machines, he said, don't care what gender you are. If you know how to use all those machines, the machines will work for you. And the machines don't discriminate. And I really had that in my brain the whole time. that I needed to speak the technical language to all of my colleagues, and they needed to understand that I was there to be technically adept, not to deal with their social issues about me. Because it's their issue, but I'll make this machine work. And I will tell them what they need to hear to overcome this issue. And that's difficult. It's difficult to constantly feel like you're in a position where you have to be a little bit more technically astute, or you have to always constantly feel like you have to raise the awareness that I'm not here for a setback. I'm not a liability. Look, I really know what I'm talking about. I'm here in this job because I really know it, not because somebody is doing me a favor. And that's a really big feeling when you show up as a minority of any kind. So I don't care if it's a gender minority, racial minority, sexual minority, identity-wise, whatever. I don't want to show up and feel like I have to show other people up just to let them know that I could really do this. But anecdotally, as a crew member, I was always in that position. I was always in that position where I felt like, oh, I'm the only female technician on this team. So if I'm not setting a kind of standard for my gender, then I'm lending a gender discrimination to all of this dozen guys who are camera, lighting, electric crew, sound crew, video playback, and I'm the only female. So it does change when you're not the only female. It does change when you're not the only one in the room who can't laugh at the joke, who's not going to be invited to sit at the lunch table, who's like you're constantly in a space of exclusion, except for being able to push those buttons, right? But having said that, one of the things that has been really precious in the conversation about we are in a male-dominated society, culture, industry, male-dominated networking, so men really do have to hold the door open for us to a certain extent. But now there's women who do. And I think one wonderful example is Oprah Winfrey and how she's mentored, and Ava DuVernay, and more recently, Ava held the door open for a Taiwanese filmmaker, a woman I've known for over almost 30 years, who's an amazing filmmaker, has all of her name's Bertha Besa Pan. She has all of the credits you could ever want. And now she's directed an episode of Queen Sugar because there's an initiative to be inclusive of women of color. That's exactly what needs to happen. So while women are in a minority, if we expand that by holding the door open for other women, then we're doing it right because we need to cooperate. So I wonder if anybody else has a story about that specifically. Have you had female mentorship, or have you had the experience of being in a very cooperative place with female colleagues?
I mean, I would say really when I created that space for myself, it's mostly because I have invited women to partner with me, or and then it becomes that, right? More than anything else, I feel like we're getting to a place where women feel more comfortable and confident and not threatened to help other women, right? I feel like in the past, it's been a space where they felt like, well, there can only be one, or I don't know, but
Yeah, tokenism.
Yeah, it's been less
token female.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have a lot of women doing that. Oh, you know what? I will say my best friend right now, she's my BFF, and she actually, I had asked her to be a producer on the last Untitled Film Foundation film. She's the woman who works at the Academy, she's the director of educational initiatives at the Academy. This is before we were best friends, we were getting to be friends, and I didn't have a job, and I was like, I need a job, this is what I do all these things, blah, blah, blah. She's like, well, you should be working at the Academy. And I was like, well, I should be, but I can't have it. Maybe I should. She's like, oh, I'm going to make that happen. We're hiring. She literally wrote, she took my resume and my bio. She wrote the job description based on my resume and bio. Then she went in and said, we need this position, and I have the perfect person for it. And they were like, well, you're supposed to post it, It's like, but I'm gonna hire this person. You can post it if you want to, but I'm hiring this person right here. She's perfect. Look at her resume. And I ended up working there for like 2 years. But it was so specific in the way that she helped me. And so now we've been partnering on things and supporting each other and helping each other. And I actually feel like it almost doing things that specific for each other is so important. Not just, yes, we're talking about women. We really have to do it. I really believe in that in general, in a larger, degree of paying it forward, paying it back for everyone. But obviously, we need the help. So helping each other to that. That was incredible, right? Who does that?
Yeah, it's also important to note that we are the pioneers. It is our generation that is the pioneering generation. And when you think about it that way, we can look at the history of cinema in an artistic context and say there have been women directors since 1895, basically. But in an economic and financial model, that was all destroyed in the post-Depression era America, where studios and access to film technology and filmmaking became another means of economy. So as soon as it became less art and more economy, just as you were saying earlier, women were not perceived to be able to handle like a budget, But that's what we're changing, and we're changing something that's been in effect mentally in our culture for about 100 years. So it wasn't there in the inception of filmmaking where it was like, well, cool, yeah, you got a story to tell. There's this weird new medium, it's motion pictures. But now we're coming back to a place where we're saying women have unique voices and points of view to contribute. And kind of leads me to my next question, which is, do you specifically write and wish to uplift female characters in your work? And if you could talk about how you write or direct or look to have portrayals of female characters in your content, what's important to you about that?
Yeah, well, I do that because who I am, right? And because I was actually talking to my big friends in the audience. Even though I am American, Chinese American, but I'm really Chinese, right? I wasn't born here, I didn't grow up here, I didn't listen to videos, and I didn't know what hamburger was when I came here. So there's a difference between my experience as an Asian in this country versus the Asians who grew up here, right? Born and grew up here. And I felt there is, that part of the story that hasn't been told. Amy Ten's Joy Luck Club is very much about American Chinese, right? And then, later, Justin Chan's Better Luck Tomorrow, and other, Asian American directors, because that's how they experienced, right? So I won't be able to write that kind of story or make that story because I don't have that kind of experience. So my experience is more like as an Asian immigrant, first generation of the immigrant. How do I deal with my kids who are American? But then I have my whole Chinese side of my family who are completely Chinese. And so, people will say, why don't you go to therapy and then talk about your mom? I said, my mom would never understand because she's Chinese. And, because it doesn't really matter. So to my mom, I'm American, and to my daughter, I'm Chinese. So that's the kind of story I felt like I could tell. And so, and also because I am a woman, and I understand, a mother, and being a mother, being a daughter, and being a wife, and so, and being a career woman. And so that's how I do it. All my movies are woman character driven, and all my stories are, right now, all of them, except my animated films, It's for kids. But all my narrative ones, they're all American Chinese family, but from a point of view of first generation immigrants rather than growing up, being Asian American. So, and I want to add a little bit more about you were talking about it, and especially you were talking about when you were on set, and my latest movie, which I just literally finished at the end of August. My set, if you get on my set, there are actually a lot more women than men. And I was so happy with that because I made it, my producer, a woman, my first 80, actually my entire 80 departments are all girls. And my production designer is a woman, and my makeup and hair are a woman, and I have 2 women in the camera department, and 1 girl in the lighting department. It makes me, because when I made my first movie in '98, that wasn't the case. Yeah, and everybody is male, white, and I was only known with male and then white. And so until this last year making this latest movie, it is a progress. We're not making progress. We're not, we're not going toward something wonderful. I do believe that. And we're the first generation of that. And so we just need to hold the door open a little bit wider for other women to come in, to join us.
I remember when I first started making short films that I would invariably have to fire the DP. Invariably.
Yeah.
Because they would never do what I was trying to ask them to do. And I was like, wait a minute, this is so weird. I'm confused. I'm the director. I'm asking for the shot, and they're literally not doing it. What the F? And they didn't do that with on other shows.
Yeah.
So, it kind of became this thing, like I'd get on a set and be like, who do I have to fire now? Immediately, before the end of the first day, so everybody knows that I'm the director. I don't think it's like that.
No.
I just did an episode of This Is Us as an actress, and I showed up, and the woman directing was an Asian, young Asian woman. And I was like, I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, are you directing this? And she's like, yes, I am. And I was like, well, that's cool. Because it had been a while since I've been working on the ERA, so I had stopped acting for a period of time, and now I was coming back into the acting. And I was just ready for the usual, and it was different. It was quite different. It was different having a woman director, too.
Amazing, right? We didn't necessarily have that specific experience, but it's out there, right? The guy who wrote it and all of that kind of stuff. So I wrote a pilot loosely based on my personal life growing up as a debutante, a reluctant one. And so I'm pitching that pilot right now as an original pilot. And it's very much got a lot of my high school years and things like that in it. And, there's other things that I've written that come from my perspective, right? I've also written other things where I center women as, the central characters and stuff. I really believe in that. The company that I work for right now, Filmco, PHILMCO, it's like philanthropy meets, film. So we have a double bottom line of art advocacy and commerce. So all of the stuff that we do has some sort of social impact. But it has to also be entertaining. That's the thing, you want to have something to say and make an impact and all of that, but it also has to be entertaining. You still got to sell tickets, right? So we are very committed to doing both of those things. And within the context of Filmco, we have some great projects about women. We're doing we're working on a feature version of the Polly Murray story. There's a documentary about that out right now, and we've got some amazing women who are working with the Annalie Culpepper, who was in the AFI directing stuff for women. She's a major TV director, African American woman, the first African American woman to direct Star Trek, and she's directing all this stuff. Catherine Hardwick is directing something for us. So there's so much material that we're directing, that we're creating, developing, producing, all of that. And I make it a point of bringing in women writers, women directors, people of color wherever I can. And so, so that's where we are.
Wonderful.
We have to talk anyway. I want you to apply to the CDP program.
Absolutely. Well, I wonder if we can open it up to audience questions, if anybody in the audience has any questions. Otherwise, I still have a few questions to ask our panel here, but we have about 20 minutes to take any questions.
We have a shy audience.
Is anybody? No?
Catherine? Unfortunately, shyness is not one of my attributes, but I would love to say just incredible panel. And having been educated almost relatively recently on the ERA, you have every right to be ever so slightly pissed. So I will leave it at that. But I hope, regardless of any of this, that everybody here is a part of Women of Color Unite. It's a relatively new organization that started out of the 2020 George Floyd just kind of influx, and I think women like you who have like real roots can do so much and then find a huge community of women and opportunities as well, just to keep going. So
Women of Color Unite.
Yes, it was created by Cheryl
Better.
Yes. I am a member.
Okay.
I'm a mentor in that company.
There's another question.
Yeah, more to keep on the positive, and I'm curious as we talk about kind of this, as women are opening doors for each other, there's a lot of women shutting doors, like that tokenism that you talked about. So I would love to hear if anyone's had an experience of how you've been able to turn around a situation where it felt like there was kind of a one-upmanship, so to speak, to help the other person realize, or to help each other, hey, if we work together, we're gonna move up together.
So if you had a situation where instead of cooperation with female colleagues, you felt that one-upmanship or competition, if there was a turnaround moment. I can give one anecdotal story. So I was on Paranormal Activity's franchise. Their 5th film was called The Ghost Dimension. And as I was mentioning, I was the only female crew member. A female camera assistant came onto the team, and the first day she didn't speak to me. She was very kind of aloof and standoffish and trying to learn the pecking order, because we were all crammed into a 5-car garage of this mansion house that was our set. And by the second day and through the rest of the show, she sat next to me, not just in her off time, but at lunch. And because she learned that I wasn't in a competition model with her, and that I wasn't there as the woman who had already been established as the techie girl on set, trying to hold some kind of token space. So the way that you break down that competitive behavior is kindness, right? And I don't remember exactly what it is I did. I think I just tried to make jokes with her or ask her if she needed a water bottle, which is a lot of what I would do on film sets to break down barriers in between my team members who were male. Like, I felt excluded so much, so I would offer people water. That was always like just one kind, very human thing you could do. Like, hey, I see you've been working really hard here. You haven't been able to leave the camera. Do you need a water bottle? And that doesn't make me subordinate. That makes me nice, because I'm a team member, I'm a crew member. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, because I sometimes dealing with it on the face of it which is how I would prefer to do it, but when I've dealt with it directly, it causes some sort of uncomfortable space that often the other person feels attacked, or that there's something, it makes it harder to get beyond it, right? So I literally I'm in the space I cannot control anyone but myself. So it's kind of in what you're talking about. I just will, behind the scenes, support that person, do things to support that person, and continue to, so that I don't know how you're going to continue to see me as a threat, but I can't control that. I just continue to do things to be helpful and supportive and in service, and that's what I do. And I don't do anything other than that. And eventually, I think it just becomes apparent that, and the person will hear, oh no, she said that you did a great job, or this or that, and then so it just organically they relax. This is organic relax.
That's the hope. Yes.
Thank you. So I'm a filmmaker, and actually I have a film here. We're having a special screening on Thursday. It's a documentary called There You Slept with the President.
Very cool.
So if you're here Thursday, you'll come at 7. So I'm like a mother of a young child, and I had this experience while making this film where right after my son was born, I went into this meeting with my financiers and producers, and they had been giving, like, we had been basically like warring over the cut. And I, came in with my child to like the top floor of the CNN building and was literally nursing when they told me that they were gonna like do a producer's cut. And they locked me out of this, like out of my edit suite. They didn't even like let me talk to the editor they hired. And then for the next 5 months, they spent $100,000 on a cut that was never used because it was a piece of garbage. I finally got to see it, and it was just like nothing from what I had done was used, and it was so bad that I just looked at the producer and was like, and he's like, yeah, I guess he's like, we don't like it either. I was like, okay, so let's get back to my film. And then I spent the next like month and a half doubling down, like just showing them, their notes, and a lot of the time they just backed off after they saw that their notes didn't work, and then making like a couple concessions that I can live with. So like the film that's out there that's been winning awards is my film, which is great. But it was really a tough experience because I felt a lot of it was because of sexism. And I felt like the opportunity that they had to take the film away was right after I gave birth. Because they thought that I'd just be too like involved with my child. And when I did get back into this the studio, my child was there, but I was able to like work with my editor. So my question though is, what do you think Hollywood does for mothers who like suddenly have much less time on their hands to like basically put in the same amount of effort and hours that they did before they had a child?
Oh, well, thank you so much for adding this vital part of what it means to, be a mother, be a woman, be in a position, a career position that are high stakes. And, I'm sorry that you went through that really gaslighting experience for the men around you to understand that it was your creative vision, which is why you were the director, still are the director, because it's your creative vision. Well, to answer really cleanly, this is such a huge topic that we need like a whole other panel for it, because there's so many women I know who've sacrificed that idea of motherhood in reality because they work so hard for their careers. So to be a mother and be following your creative passion and be a filmmaker is such a rare opportunity that it is up to us who have that multiple roles to show that it's completely and totally possible, that it's completely and totally natural. And maybe 2 generations ago you were juggling 9 kids, but look, you've got 1 kid in a movie, that's like having 9 kids, right? it's like that. It's like, well, what do you mean like women can't multitask? Like literally that's what we do all the time. It's kind of funny.
By the way, though, what you're bringing up is a huge problem in this business. And when I was doing, when we were interviewing attorneys, there was this horrible thing that's in the film about a woman that was pregnant. But this attorney took me aside and said, what I'd really like to tell you about is all my clients that as soon as production found out they were pregnant, were not picked up over hiatus, were released, and nobody can do anything about it. She had, I don't know, 20 women in the entertainment business that were filing these kind of suits. Again, ERA.
Very hard
Because
for
they won't
talent.
be able to do that anymore.
Very hard for talent, especially, and well, there's very few stories we could probably dig up of actresses who were pregnant and getting more and more visibly pregnant over the course of a production who were accommodated in
I
that.
know Karen Washington was on
Right.
Scandal, but it's a
That's one
a
story.
woman of color,
Yeah.
as a showrunner. Come on.
Yeah, you have to have a certain amount of power.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was doing production sound, and I was 3 months pregnant, and I made sure nobody knew. There was a 0% chance anybody around me was going to know, because I knew I was going to be seen as a liability and get fired. So instead, I just started napping at lunch, my 30-minute lunch. I'd go nap in my van, and I couldn't stand the smell of the catering either. So I just got out of there. I just stopped being social, But that was like the first trimester. After that, I couldn't hide it, so I quit, and I changed my career.
I do want to say that one of my favorite, we do behind the scene photos for our fellows, right? So one of our fellows, Manjari Makajani, she's East Indian. She's pregnant, through the whole program, and we're like, how are you gonna, right when you're supposed to be doing your thing, you're gonna be popping a baby out, right? She's like, oh, I'll be fine. The baby's gonna come a week after. So literally, my favorite photo is of her. She's 8 plus 2 weeks pregnant, directing, and a week after she did her shoot, she popped her baby. I was like, oh, you're a superhero. How did you do that? It was incredible. That's my favorite thing.
It's so weird. Pregnancy is not an illness.
Because of that lawsuit with UPS. So pregnant women are treated legally as disabled people.
Wow. Yeah.
Temporarily disabled.
Yeah. So it's a lot of discrimination, the layers of discrimination, and what you just brought up, such a vital contribution. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And, I hope all the guys around you were like, oh shoot, all I've nursed is a beer tonight. I gotta come to work tomorrow. Does anybody else have a question? We have about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I just have a comment. I apologize for being late to this very distinguished panel. I know Cammie from a long time ago, and one of the first films she made, which you may have told him about your Jeanette Rankin film.
Briefly, a
Yeah,
single
well, the stories of the past that we bring these women forward with us, and we insist on people knowing about them, is one of the ways to move. I've been making documentaries on women's history for a long time, and I had one time I had a letter for a young woman. This is after the film California Women Win the Vote was sent out around the country to various small PBS stations. And she wrote and she said, I saw your film at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to run for office because that was awesome. So we have no idea, by pressing our stories, how influential they can be. They drop into people's heads and they torture themselves with it until they do something. So I thank you women for making the films that you do, and let's keep telling our stories. And the guys like these stories too. They get a kick out of them sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, and now, by the way, the costume of a couple of years ago for the Halloween was Inez Milholland, who led the great 1913 campaign on a white horse in her Joan of Arc, and young girls dressed up like her, and they were in power.
Wow.
So keep telling your stories.
Thank you so much.
I also want to add a little bit about the whole woman become a mother, right? Because I'm a mother, I have 2 kids. It is very difficult because that's just man and woman are different, right? They don't carry the baby, we do. And I do remember that after my daughter was born, and I was actually having a writing assignment, so I went to this producer's home for talking about script, And he's big shot producer and lived in Hollywood in this big mansion. And I had to hide my pump because I literally, my daughter was barely 3 months old, and I was breastfeeding her. And the whole time I was going to his home like every day. He didn't know I was actually pumping milk for my daughter because I was so afraid that he knew that I'm actually a mother, losing sleep and nursing a 3 months old. I wouldn't get this gig. So it is a very different, much deeper, bigger, subject to talk about it. But
Very big subject.
Yeah,
I think that everybody has a mother, but yet we have to face discrimination for one of the most natural parts of human existence.
Yeah. So I was actually when I was talking to you on the phone, when I was when I am on the set, I have a lot of female. Crew member and cast member, I actually consciously try to feel if they're having a period or not. Because men never have that, right? Because, women sometimes have the period is not a simple thing. You have cramps and you feel down, you feel not quite yourself. And somehow, male, our co-male workers, they don't need to experience that. So how do we actually be sensitive about it and don't feel like, how come she's such a bitch today? I'm just sorry. So there's a lot more besides diversity and gender equality. There's also a lot of biological things that we do. Uniquely us, I'm very proud of being a woman, being a mother, and being a wife, but we do have to deal with that.
That's very funny. It's like that should be supported in an emotional, mental way, but not used as a weapon when someone is, having a bad day. No, I was just having a bad day, but not my period. What's your excuse?
Really important topics. Well, we have about 5 minutes left. Do you have a question?
I do. I'm trying to think how to articulate it. I'm a filmmaker as well. I'm a filmmaker as well. And yay! And I'm also currently in the AFI Directing Workshop for Women. And one of the things that's kind of been formulating in my head as I've been listening to this whole panel today is, so I've had the advantage of being an independent filmmaker this entire time, which means I can hire my own crew. It is 98% women on all my sets every time. It's, and so there is a very different environment, but I do hope, especially being in this workshop right now, that, in the next year or two, I'm going to also move into a network space as well. And moving into that, into a setting where I don't have as much control over these things, and I listen to these questions, whether they're about who's pregnant, who's not, or I find myself wondering, do you know of ways or have any tips of how we can maintain more power as we move into, say, being a director for hire for TV or for movie, or because it is not the most powerful position, and still we're not in positions of power. Are there any tips? I know if you're a writer, they always say make sure you can always get a producer credit too, and that gives you more or whatever. But I'm just wondering, as directors,
created by credit. You want that?
Okay.
You want to direct the pilot, because if you direct the pilot, then it doesn't matter if you don't direct other episodes. You're still part of that economically.
Yeah.
I would say you want to get an agent that will fight for you and that will be the buffer for you, so that you don't have to show up on set having cursed out a producer, and you can just be the lovely, elegant person that you are, and somebody else just ripped him a new one, so that you can get there at 10 and not at whatever. But get a really good agent and a good lawyer. Get a good lawyer.
Just to add to that wonderful advice, thank you. I feel like one of the keys is not just creating the content, but no matter if you're writer, director, putting a producer hat on and seeing what more resources you can attach. It's like the more resources you bring, the less likely you are to get, kind of voted out of the room to a certain extent. Even if that's going to happen, how can you become a bridge for financing? How can you bring in clout that is yours? And, at a certain point, what I'm always looking for are female financiers, are women who have the ability to financially back as executives. So when you have an executive level, advocate who says, no, she's the director, and you need to have established people say, no, she is the best person for the job. Who is the best person for the job? When it comes down to it, you have all the credits, all the clout, you're right there, and still there's a gender bias that you're dealing with. Money is the tipping point, a resource is the tipping point, a powerful actor or actress who says, no, she's the director. And there needs to be those voices who say, I absolutely believe in her, and she is the person I'm here to work with. And if she's removed, I'm going too, because I was here with her. But we need to get
Say a little bit about that really quickly. I'm giving the advice that goes against everything that people say in Hollywood, actually, which is I feel like you need to have a little bit of skin in the game and invest in yourself. If there's something, if you're in a position to do so, if there's a project that you want, you got to put the money in it yourself. Okay, do it yourself. Don't listen to people who say, never put your own money in it. We do it as independent filmmakers all the time. We do it. Why would you not? There's a project that a good friend of mine wrote it, and the actual lawyer that I hired to negotiate the contract said, well, you shouldn't be paying for this option. You shouldn't be paying for it. I'm like, I want to make sure that I have the project when I go out to these way more powerful companies who are going to want to be a part of this project. I need to put my, so I'm like, and it's my friend, so it's like, you should be paying for the option. Anyway, I'm just saying, and for yourself, I pay for workshops for myself, investing in myself. And we do that as filmmakers.
Thank you for adding that. It's such a big deal because I also was told never put your own money. But let me tell you, when I made my first short film, which got into Cannes and won half a dozen awards, and I leveraged $15,000 from Kickstarter and another like $3,000 to $5,000 of my own money, I ended up with 6 figures of more investment. So I say to every single person, you put your money up, that's skin in the game, and you don't know who else is going to step up based on your passion and your content. And in my experience, I've gone in 6 years from making my first independent short film to raising about $500,000 of private capital for pilot creation. For pilot right? No risk, no reward. And you don't know how big the reward can be, and it may be, just exponentially bigger. And so we
I never regret doing it. It's not about, honestly, that's not about the result of it. The universe the universe responds to you investing in yourself and believing in yourself. It really does. Eventually, it really does.
Well, thank you so much, everybody.